Dead men tell no tales, but their ships speak volumes. Welcome to the Cursed Compass, where we explore the darkest maritime mysteries.
On July 10, 1969, the Royal Mail ship Picardy intercepted a drifting trimaran in the mid-Atlantic, roughly 1,800 miles from England. A boarding party found the vessel entirely devoid of life, yet the ship was physically intact. There were clear signs of recent habitation, including unkempt living quarters and evidence of recent cooking. This was the Teignmouth Electron. Its captain was Donald Crowhurst, a British amateur sailor and businessman who had entered the Sunday Times Golden Globe race, a non-stop, single-handed, around-the-world yacht competition. The discovery drew immediate comparisons to maritime ghost stories like the Mary Celeste, but the Teignmouth Electron presents no supernatural mystery. Through the logs and physical evidence left aboard, the ship provides a documentary evidence of a complete engineering and psychological collapse. The build began with blueprints for Arthur Piver's Victress-class trimaran, chosen by Crowhurst to maximize speed on the water. Compared to a monohull, a trimaran achieves speed by dispersing weight across 3 hulls. If a monohull is pushed over, its keel self-rights, but if a trimaran flips past 90 degrees, it remains permanently inverted. Crowhurst planned a computer to monitor water levels. The physical backup to the sensor network was a massive buoyancy bag mounted on the main mast. If the computer sensed an imminent capsize, it would inflate the bag, holding the boat at a rightable 90-degree angle. The execution of this design faced extreme constraints. The initial 6,000-pound construction budget quickly ballooned by 200%, and the boat was shipped to the final boatyard with only 16 days left before the race's absolute starting deadline. Because of this compressed timeline and capital shortage, the central computer remained a tangle of unconnected wires in the cabin, and the buoyancy bag was never installed. The missing safety equipment created a cascade of structural errors. Anticipating the heavy weight of the buoyancy bag, builders permanently shortened the main mast by 4 feet, altering the sail plan. Furthermore, the deck featured an unusually high number of hatches. A supply shortage of the correct soft rubber meant a harder, less malleable material was substituted, practically guaranteeing the seals would leak under ocean pressure. These rushed, untested modifications resulted in a vessel leaving port stripped of its primary capsize defenses. The resulting trimaran was mathematically unsuited to survive the immense swells of the Roaring Forties. On October 31st, the last possible day to qualify, Crowhurst towed the boat out of Teignmouth Harbor. Sea trials had already shown the boat could not sail windward, a major deficiency for global navigation. 3 days into the Atlantic Ocean voyage, the Hasler self-steering gear vibrated loose and shed 2 critical metal screws. Crowhurst then discovered he had failed to pack any spare screws or bolts on board, forcing him to cannibalize non-essential hardware to maintain control. By November 5th, the port bow float began taking on water. When Crowhurst opened the compartment to bail it out, 15-foot seas poured directly into the opening, flooding it to deck level. 8 days later, the hard rubber seals on the cockpit hatch failed. The resulting leak flooded the engine compartment and drowned the on-in generator, severing his ability to power his primary communications array. This sequence of mechanical failures trapped Crowhurst in a lethal paradox. To proceed into the Southern Ocean meant certain death. To abandon the race and return meant absolute financial ruin. On November 16th, Crowhurst made a calculated pivot. Rather than drop out, he would stay in the Atlantic and fake his circumnavigation. He executed this by maintaining a strict dual logbook methodology. One log recorded his precise, actual coordinates for personal survival. A second log contained meticulously fabricated data for public transmission. This map displays his actual route. For months, he meandered off South America, making almost no progress. Meanwhile, his transmitted coordinates charted a vastly different course into the Southern Ocean. While actually ghosting at 2 knots, he claimed daily runs of 243 fabricated miles. This stagnation culminated on March 6th, when he secretly broke the rules of the nonstop race and dropped anchor in Rio Salado, Argentina. He grounded the boat in the receding tides, specifically to repair a large split in the skin of the starboard float. This damage was not caused by ocean trauma. The internal wooden frames separated from the plywood because of poor fiberglass application by the English shipyard. With the boat patched, Crowhurst solidified his exit strategy. He would loiter in the Atlantic until leading competitors sailed back up from the Cape, falling in behind them to finish with a plausible time. The critical requirement was that he must not win. First-place finishers would have their navigation logs subjected to rigorous forensic scrutiny by officials, which would immediately expose the forged data. As organizers broadcasted position reports, Nigel Tetley received Crowhurst's falsified coordinates. Believing he was in a direct sprint against Crowhurst's record-breaking pace, Tetley pushed his own trimaran to its absolute structural limit to maintain his lead. On May 21st, Tetley's boat disintegrated and sank under the strain of that pace. Crowhurst, who had been aiming for a middle-of-the-pack finish to avoid an audit, was suddenly the default winner, trapped by the very data he had invented. The data fraud was now an inescapable trap. If he finished the race, the forgery would be exposed. If he confessed over the radio, the humiliation would be absolute. On June 23rd, Crowhurst entered his final sunsight. After this date, all navigational entries ceased entirely. In place of coordinates, he began writing a 25,000-word philosophical manifesto across his logs. He focused on second-order differentials, documenting an attempt to mathematically extract himself from reality, where his exposure would no longer matter. On July 1st, he documented his final confession. His last entry reads, "It is finished. It is the mercy. I will resign the game." The mathematical execution of his own fraud had created a logical paradox with only one exit. Shortly after making this entry, Crowhurst stepped off the boat, taking his chronometer and the forged logbook with him. Following its discovery by the Picardy, the vessel was auctioned off. In 1973, it was purchased by a Jamaican entrepreneur named Bunny Francis. Francis immediately made the functional modifications Crowhurst had originally sacrificed for weight. He expanded the small doghouse to increase the living space and heavily fiberglassed the entire hull. Most notably, Francis removed the dagger boards and constructed a new 12-foot keel on the main hull. This single alteration finally corrected the severe windward and stability issues that had plagued the original voyage. The boat was later sold to the McDermott brothers, who relocated the vessel to the small island of Cayman Brac. Stripped of its racing pedigree, the trimaran spent the next several years in mundane service as a local scuba diving boat, until a minor grounding incident in 1983. Its physical demise occurred on shore. While being lifted for repairs, a crane dropped the boat, severely damaging the hull. 5 years later, Hurricane Gilbert battered the remaining structure, forcing the abandonment of all restoration plans. During one of those early restoration attempts, a haunting detail emerged. Workers dismantling the arms between the main hull and the floats discovered Crowhurst's emergency rations, still sealed and untouched in secret compartments. The physical decay continued unabated for decades. In 2017, a team executed a high-resolution digital scanning project, preserving the exact geometry of the wreckage before the elements could consume it entirely. Today, the boat remains on the beach in Cayman Brac. It is an empty, rotting hull, stripped of its aluminum mast, rigging, and all usable hardware. The boat remains exactly where it was dropped decades ago, a collection of fiberglass and rotting plywood that serves as the final physical endpoint for the ambition and engineering failure that began in a 16-day construction window.